Stop swearing then, huh? Are we ready to get started then, Amerigo?
Yeah, let's go ahead and get going.
You got it. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming to this brand new second meeting of water services. We will make April now wastewater. Troy's not on. Thank you, Eric, for that wonderful suggestion that we include a separate meeting for wastewater because it's so important and there's so much work going on, and we know even now as we get into water shortages how wastewater is going to become more and more important over the next few years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Nazario, who is the head of the wastewater division. So yeah, with that, why don't you give us a little background, Nazario, on you and how you got to this place? And
you got it. Thank you, Chuck. Good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to be able to tell you a little bit about the wastewater utility here at the City of Phoenix. Let me know if anybody has a question or raises hands. I can't see anything here. I'm just looking at my presentation. So if anybody has a question, feel free to stop me at any time. Just a little bit of my background. I'm a civil engineer by trade. I went to University of Texas at El Paso. While I was working on my senior project, I got to work at a water treatment plant. So initially, the reason I wanted to be a civil engineer was to design structures, right? To design bridges and buildings and different things. And then I was exposed to water and I fell in love with it. And it's been my passion for the last, I don't know, I hate to say it, 20 years already. So it's been a long time. So from the Canal Street water treatment plant, working on a senior project, I got offered the opportunity to stay while working on a master's degree and continue the research at the facility. I was also working for a geotech professor as well. But then life happened. I started my family early and I had to get a job. So I got a job offer in California, went to work for the Metropolitan Water District. I did not finish my master's, but I got a lot of really good experience through it. And then I went to work for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, spent 3 years there as their demand guy. We essentially had a demand forecasting tool that we use to be able to figure out how much water was going to be needed in the short term. So we were the short-term demand folks. And that was a great experience working for the Metropolitan Water District. But then I had an opportunity to move to Phoenix, and I did. And I've been in Phoenix for 16 years now. I have a wife of 19 years and a daughter in first year in college. 2 younger boys, 11 and 14. I love basketball. I love sports. I hate to say this, but I'm a huge Maverick fan. So I was super stoked about their win yesterday. Love Luka Doncic. I do love the Suns as well. As long as they're not playing my Mavs, I'll root for the Suns. But yeah, I love basketball. I love sports. I love this industry. I love what we do. I think it's crazy importance. I think during the pandemic, it was shown that, our folks are just, they're incredible. And without what they do at our treatment facilities, maintaining our infrastructure, none of the healthcare workers could have done their job. So I think I think we went a long way to show people how important our employees are. So yeah, that's a little about me. I grew up in Mexico. Luckily I was born in the US, but I spent most of my childhood in northern Mexico. My dad had a farm and a ranch. So I kind of grew up in that environment, which was a great place to grow up. But yeah, I value water. I love the industry and I appreciate everything that we have here, right? It's an amazing country and we have lots of resources. So again, I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about the wastewater utility. But I don't know if anybody has any questions about my background or anything else. If not, I'll get started with my presentation.
yeah, that was a great introduction. Thank you, Nazario.
Oh, thank you, Chuck. Appreciate that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our wastewater utility. If this thing isn't sliding, so hold on. There it is. So before I get started on the wastewater stuff, I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of the department overview. So I think I'm sure you've all met our director, right? Our newer director, because it's been, I think, over a year now that he's been in charge, Troy Hayes. He's our water services director. And as Eric said, he's kind of a water guy at heart. He's worked his way through the department, mainly on the water side, but he tells me that he's very much into wastewater now. So we enjoy our conversations. But yeah, he's been our director for over a year. And then I'm going to start from right to left and start with the 4 assistant directors that report to him. On the far right, you'll see Jim Swanson. He's our newest assistant director, and he oversees the technical support, I would call him, branch of the water services department. That includes basically all the smaller divisions and sections that support the water and the wastewater utilities. To give you an example, environmental services division, he oversees that, the GIS group, infrastructure record services, asset management. So he's got a number of groups that support both the water and the wastewater branches or utilities. So then next you'll see me, assistant director. I already gave you my bio, but I oversee the wastewater treatment division, the wastewater collection division, wastewater engineering division. And then we also have, within wastewater, we have what is called the energy and facilities group. And they essentially work on non-process related assets for the entire department, but they happen to reside in the wastewater utility. They also work on, energy upgrades and, replacing light bulbs and those kinds of things to try to be more efficient when it comes to our energy management. And then you've got Brandy Kelso, who's the assistant director next to me. She's kind of my counterpart. She oversees the water utility. Then next to her, you've got Holly Rosenthal, who is our assistant director over finance and administration. She oversees basically all the money divisions, right? Customer service, budget and fiscal. She also has procurement, internal business support, and a few others. And I forgot to mention, Brandy oversees similar groups than I do. It's essentially the same structure with the exception that she also has a division called meter operations. We don't meter wastewater primarily, only for research purposes and for billing our Shrug partners. So we don't have meters at every tap. And obviously we have to meter the water, and that's the division that handles that. And then left to Holly, you've got Cynthia Campbell, who's the city's water resources management advisor. And you might ask, why does she have a dash line to Troy? Well, after Catherine Sorensen left, our previous director, the position of water resources management advisor was moved to the 12th floor. And she now reports directly to a deputy city manager, that she works hand in hand with Troy Hayes. And that's why we put a dash line to Troy, but she's still an integral part of the division. And her former division, she used to have the water resources division, now falls under Jim Swanson's purview. So now I'll talk a little bit about wastewater. So I'll start with treatment plants. And let me know if you're having a hard time hearing or seeing or just whatever. If there's any issues with the presentation, please stop me. So we'll talk about our wastewater treatment plants. And here on this map, you can kind of see our service area. And then you've got the 3 blocks, right? So you've got the 3 squares. The top one is our Cape Creek Water Reclamation Plant, which is our smallest wastewater treatment plant. It's an 8 MGD facility. It's located in the north, a catty corner from our Union Hill surface water treatment plant. The idea, even back then when it was built in the early 2000s, was that this was going to be our first DPR plant at some point, right? So the thought was, let's build it close to a surface water treatment plant so that then we can send the effluent to that plant eventually, whenever the regulations are adopted and the guidelines are written, and we're able to go there in terms of making sure the public is good with it at that time. But we all know that's where we're all headed. Eventually, that's where we're going to go. So the thought was years ago that this would likely be our first DPR facility. So to give you a little bit of background on this plant, it was built in the early 2000s. The thought was we're going to have all these expansions, right, as development was booming at the time. But then the recession hit and everything slowed down. We didn't get the flows that we thought we were expecting. It was a very expensive plant to operate. It was kind of finicky with the low flows. And the executive management team at the time made the decision to shut it down, to mothball the plant in 2009. So that plant was shut down. And at the time, we already had a what you would call in other places a purple pipe system, but essentially a distribution system for reclaimed water customers. And we have about 11 to 13 reclaimed water customers up in that area. So we had to find a way to serve them with this plant being shut down. So we said in the interim, we're going to provide them portable water at a reclaimed rate. That was for a couple of years until we built a raw water line that connected the two plants and essentially sent CAP water into the reclaimed water system. So we've been providing them raw water kind of directly from the canal. It comes from the impound at the Union Hills plant, and we've been providing them that water. So over the last couple of years, the intent has been to bring this plant back. We've been through a number of iterations in terms of expanding it or not. We considered bringing it back as a 12 MGD facility, and then with the kind of more recent activity in the north, the thought was to bring it in as to double capacity and go to a 16 MGD facility. But in the end, where we are today, we have decided to kind of backtrack for a number of reasons, some of them financial, some of them just other things that have happened in the north, updating our master plan for the north and having a different vision for the north. So we decided to bring it back just as an 8 MGD facility. Right now there's funding for construction in 24-25. It's all subject to change, but that's where it's at today. And we are in the process of designing, bringing it back at 8 MGD. So that's kind of the plan with that plant. I don't know if anybody has questions at this point. If not, I'll continue. So now, if I don't hear any questions, I'll go down and talk a little bit about our 23rd Avenue wastewater treatment plant. So this is a facility that is Phoenix only, just like the Cave Creek plant. We own and operate this plant. Our 23rd Avenue wastewater treatment plant is the oldest of the three facilities. And it was built in the early 1900s as a treatment plant. The current treatment capacity of this plant is 63 million gallons per day, but we operated between 25 and 30 million gallons per day. So some people have asked, isn't it more cost effective to just bypass the plant, mothball that one and send it to 91st? And the answer is yes, it is. 91st is extremely cost effective, right? It's just such a large facility. However, what makes 23rd extremely valuable is the fact that we can take 30,000 acre feet of effluent, of reclaimed water, and convert it to 20,000 acre feet of surface water. So there is a three-way exchange between the Roosevelt Irrigation District, the Salt River Project, and the city of Phoenix, in which we make that happen, right? We send 30,000 acre feet of effluent to Roosevelt Irrigation District for, they use it to irrigate people's homes and non-edible crops and different things. And we in turn get 20,000 acre feet from SRP of non-project water that we can use anywhere in our system to serve our customers. So I don't know how familiar you all are with kind of the water rights and that type of thing, but essentially the way it works is you are considered on project if you were part of the land that was originally farmed with Salt and Verde River water. So what that means is we can't take water that was originally used to farm that on project land and use it outside of that area. So it makes it a little tricky, right? When we're talking about, cities are extremely efficient and we use a lot less water than farms. So as things redevelop, we're using less and less water. So we're using less of our, I believe it's 3 acre-feet per acre of SRP water. We're only using like 1.8, but we can't take what we're not using and use it elsewhere. However, there have been opportunities through the years to create new water that is still Salt and Verde water that we can use elsewhere. So these 20,000 acre feet, that's what that is, right? It essentially creates 20,000 acre feet of water that we can use anywhere in the system. And just like that, we participated in raising Roosevelt Dam years ago, which created another 100,000 acre feet of water, something like that. Don't quote me on the number, but it's close to that. And then we also paid for some gates at one of the, I think it's Horseshoe Dam, which also added another 20 to 30,000 acre feet. So that's considered non-project water, but it's still Salt and Verde River water that we can use elsewhere. So to talk a little bit about water, because I think it's relevant, I think you heard from Troy's presentation when he talked about, the Pumping North project and some of the things that we're doing in terms of taking drought resiliency measures. So what that pipeline is going to do, it's going to allow us to transport and convey some of these new SRP and Verde waters that aren't tied to the land. It allows us to move them to areas where we might have shortages, right? Where we'll have a deficit in terms of Colorado River water reductions. Anyway, that's kind of a little bit of the background of 23rd and why it's so important to operate that facility. Lastly, I will briefly touch on 91st because I've got a few slides at the end to talk more about 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant. But ultimately, the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant is the largest of the 3 plants. It is co-owned with 5 other Valley cities. It has a treatment capacity of 230 million gallons per day. And it's one of the largest wastewater treatment plants in the Southwest. And most of the reclaimed water is sent to the Palo Verde nuclear generating station. So next I'm gonna, again, if anybody has questions at this point, please feel free to interrupt. Or if you want to wait till the end, I'm fine with that too. So next, here's a map of our wastewater collection system. It just kind of gives you just an idea of how large and kind of the size and magnitude of our system. This map here reflects the 15-inch and larger diameter mains that we have to own and operate. We also own and operate 28 lift stations as part of this collection system. And we've got 5,000 miles of pipe, most of which is gravity pipe. Most of it, I think 93% is vitrified clay pipe. And then the diameters of these mains range between 4 inches and 90 inches in diameter. And we also have about 300 miles of force main that we own and maintain. So how do we, now that I've kind of touched a little bit on kind of the magnitude of the utility and all the infrastructure that it has, how do we manage to keep it up to date and manage to operate it efficiently and make sure that it runs properly? Well, that's where our wastewater CIP comes in. So it's a very large CIP. It's a 5-year CIP, close to $2 billion. As you can see in this pie chart, about half of that is used towards rehabbing, replacing, and upgrading the collection system, not including lift stations. Lift stations account for another 9% of that budget. 37% of the current CIP is allocated for wastewater treatment plant renewal and rehab, while a small amount, 1%, is allocated for odor control measures. And then 3%, as I mentioned before, in the wastewater utility, we have the energy management and the facilities group. So 3% of that is used for those types of projects. So this slide here is just meant to kind of talk a little bit about the portion of the CIP or the treatment facility program where, you know, the intent is to obviously increase system reliability, enhance safety by reducing costs and lessening operating risk. So we're constantly looking at projects that will help us continue to operate and maintain and treat the wastewater efficiently and effectively over time. And there are many projects that are currently in the works. I'll be honest with you, there was a period of time where we, you know, the city and the Schrock partners, were not investing as much money and resources into rehabbing and replacing aging infrastructure at the facility, that it was causing a lot of operational challenges, right? So a few years back, the Schrock partners and the city of Phoenix obviously came up with a master plan and developed a 10-year plan to rehab and replace aging infrastructure at the facility. In the past, the idea was that we would just let certain old plants go, build new ones, because we have a lot of land. Because the thought was that as population grew, we were going to need more treatment capacity. We were going to need more, you know, we're just going to need more treatment facilities. But the reality is that even though population has grown, wastewater generation in terms of the liquid side has remained fairly flat over the last 20 to 30 years. So that's due primarily to all the indoor water efficiency gains over time. So what that led us to do is to kind of rethink our previous plan or previous approach of just building new ones and instead taking what we have and rehabbing it and developing a system similar to what the water side has. On the water side, they essentially go into every plant and do major rehab every 4 years, right? So every year they're taking down a plant and doing some major rehab for a month or maybe two, which essentially extends the life of the plant significantly, and it allows for efficient replacing of aging infrastructure. So we kind of wanted to mimic that on the wastewater side, but we're just getting started. So this is kind of the early stages of that. You know, just to give you some example, our solids rehab phase 1 project, which is essentially a project to replace and rehabilitate equipment and facilities that are used in solids thickening, solids dewatering, and solids digestion. That project is underway. Our plant 2 rehab project is also I believe it's in design at this point, looking at our primaries, our aeration basins, our secondaries, essentially the whole plant. And then as we go further in time, once we get that one done, then we'll go to the next plants and try to get that done over a period of 10 to 12 years. One of the other things that we're doing this year is we're updating our master plan, right? So because these projects take so long, that sometimes it's just good to, hey, let's give it another quick look. Let's do an update to the master plan and reprioritize some of these projects because things could have changed and maybe what we thought, you know, 4 years ago doesn't make sense anymore. So I think that's an important project that we're starting as well. So I mentioned that on the sewer side, we're essentially allocating about 50% of our CIP to the collection system, and a good portion of this is for the large interceptors. I think some of you may have heard that there are 3 major interceptors that the city of Phoenix owns and operates. We own them jointly with other cities. We have our Southern Avenue Interceptor, our Salt River Outfall Interceptor, and the 99th Avenue Interceptor. And what we do is we take kind of a similar approach, and this is what we're essentially doing with most of our large infrastructure. We do an assessment 1 year, we do design the next year, and then we do construction the following year. So we're just kind of in that cycle of constantly doing assessment, design, and then construction. So just to give you kind of an idea of where we are, in terms of the 99th Avenue Interceptor, that one's currently being assessed. And once we're completed with, once the assessment's complete, then the following year will be design, and the year after that is construction. And the same could be said for the other two interceptors. The SAI, the next assessment cycle, is planned for fiscal year 22-23. Again, the SAI is a Southern Avenue interceptor. And the SRO, or the Salt River Outfall Interceptor, that cycle is planned for fiscal year 23-24, with design and construction the subsequent years. I also mentioned that we have 28 lift stations throughout our collection system, ranging in size from 0.4 MGD all the way up to 25 MGD. And we have a number of projects through this program that are currently being worked on. We've got Lift Station 40 refurbishment project. This lift station is located at the northwest corner of I-10 and Ray Road. This project, refurbishment, includes the design of a new wet well and above ground piping connecting to the force main, and a lot of other work to the site. We also have Lift Station 66 refurbishment. This lift station is located by the north transfer station up in the northern area of town near I-17 and North Valley Parkway. So this lift station includes replacing pumps, VFDs, instrumentation and control, adding a biofilter, site grading. There's all kinds of work that's happening at this lift station as well. Then we have Lift Station 61. This is a civil and electrical improvement project. This is a smaller lift station located in the southwest. It's near 107th and Broadway. This was a lift station that was intended to be a temporary lift station years ago, when the plan was to build a large 40 MGD lift station for the Southwest. This was kind of at the time when development was booming and our design standards were different than they are today. And we were thinking that wastewater flows were going to continue to increase. Well, that didn't happen. So we had to pivot. We had to kind of change the way we were thinking things. And we decided to keep some of these temporary lift stations and make them permanent. So this is one of them. And because of that, there's some improvements that we need to make to it. We also, because at the time it was built as a temporary facility, I think if you all have worked with the water department in the past, you know that we require redundant force mains for all our lift stations. Well, this one was temporary. So at the time they thought, well, let's just put one force main because eventually it's going to go away. Well, now that we're keeping it and it's going to be a permanent lift station, we need to add a redundant force main. So there's a redundant force main project for Lift Station 66. And just like this, there's a lot of other projects that are planned for our lift stations. So if you remember the pie chart, about 1% of the CIP's 5-year of the budget in the CIP goes towards odor control. It's not a lot percentage-wise, but it's a very important program. We want to make sure that we can minimize citizen complaints regarding odor issues. We also comply with air quality regulations, and we reduce corrosion to the wastewater collection system. So it's extremely important. We're starting to look at smart technology. There's a lot of products out there that claim to be really good for this type of thing. So we're starting to look at them. If any of you know of any that you've used on projects, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear about it because we're just starting to do a little bit of that research. There's about 2 or 3 products that we've seen that look promising. So next, I want to dive a little bit deeper into our 91st Avenue wastewater treatment facility because I think it's a great story to tell. I think it's one of the most environmentally sustainably responsible facilities in the Southwest and maybe even in the country. Because when you think about this facility, essentially we take a waste product and we turn it into products that we can reuse. So pretty much everything that comes into the plant is reused. It's put to beneficial use. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that. So for those of you that don't know, you saw the map, you kind of get an idea of where it's at. This facility is owned by the 5 cities that I mentioned before: Glendale, Mesa, Scottsdale, Tempe, and Phoenix. But Phoenix is responsible for the day-to-day operations, while the other member cities of SHROG, or the sub-regional operating group, weigh in on decisions about plant upgrades and provide financing relative to the volume of wastewater they send to the plant. So this could be a tricky, and complex situation, right? Because we operate it, we like to do things a certain way, but we can't necessarily do it that way because our partners have to agree. So it's almost like not only do we have our own council to get approval from, but we have the SHROG members that have to approve of these projects. So it takes a lot of, providing a lot of information, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of explaining things to get them to see that some of these things are needed, because nobody wants to spend more money. But that's our job, to show them that it's absolutely warranted and needed. And sometimes it goes smoother than other times, but it does add complexity to properly maintaining this facility. So the slideshow, on this slide, you can kind of see that how the facility expanded. So if you can see the slide, you can see that right in the middle, you've got our plant 1 and our solids facilities. So that's those are the oldest portions of our facilities. And as population has increased, we've added different plants, right? So we have plant 2, plant 3, and then we added the unified plants, which, we refer to them as the UP plants, but it's unified plant 01, unified plant 05. If you recall, I mentioned that the plan before was to go to this kind of just adding new plants over time. So we were going to go to UP 01, 05, 2010, 2015, and so forth. And then as we built the new plants, we just kind of get rid of the old ones. That was the previous thought, but that's no longer what we're doing. Now we're actually going back and rehabbing the older facilities. So let's see. So this next slide just it's kind of an overlook of our environmental commitments. I mentioned how environmentally sustainable 91st Avenue is. We send the vast majority of the water, or the majority of the water, to the Palo Verde nuclear generating station. We also send some to Tres Rios wetlands. The biosolids, they're all sent to West Valley Farms, and they're used for land application purposes or soil amendment. And then kind of the last piece of the puzzle that we didn't have until 2019 was to be able to capture the biogases that are generated from the digesters. And I'm proud to say that we now are doing that. So essentially, just about everything that goes into the plant is, turns into something that we can reuse, with the exception of what's captured at the bar screens and the grit basins, and then maybe when we clean out our digesters, that all goes to landfill. But I think it's a pretty cool story. It's pretty impressive. And now I'll talk a little bit about Palo Verde. Some of you you're all a bunch of engineers, so I'm sure you're all familiar with this nuclear plant. But the cool story about this is that this is the only nuclear plant in the world that's not next to a large body of water. And that's because of the agreement that they have with SHROG, with us, and the water that we provide. So by contract, we're required to provide up to 80,000 acre feet per year. They generally take about 71,000 acre feet. That's kind of what they're averaging over the last few years. But just to give you kind of a little bit of stats on what this facility does and what it is, it sits on 4,000 acres. It's about 80 miles west of our treatment plant. It has 3 combustion engineering pressurized water reactors, produces 3.3 gigawatts of electricity, which is enough to power 4 million, to power the homes of 4 million people across 4 states. It employs about 2,500 workers, and it has about a $2 billion economic impact on Arizona. So the agreement with us is extremely important, and we know how important that is, and we make sure that we can always meet that commitment. So I mentioned Biosolids Reuse. This is another area where SHROG and Phoenix have been doing an amazing job for years. essentially what happens is our biosolids are hauled off and they're sent to farmlands in the West Valley so that they can use it as land application. The only downside that I see with this is the fact that we haven't been able to monetize this, right? We actually pay somebody to haul it off and then they sell it to these farms. So if there was anything we could do to change that in the future, I think that would be a win-win, right? So that's the only thing that I see that's kind of a negative here, but ultimately, I think it's an amazing story that we use it. And we've been doing this for decades, but like I said, the only piece that we were missing was the biogas reuse. But as of 2019, this plant, this 91st Avenue Renewable Natural Gas Plant has been working and it's operational. And this plant is the largest wastewater treatment biogas to RNG facility of its kind in the United States, or at least it was a year or so ago. I don't know if there's any new ones out there. And it's capable of processing 3,250 standard cubic feet per minute of raw digester gas produced at the wastewater treatment plant. So essentially what it did is now it allows us to reuse that gas. And it generates about $1 million a year for the Schrock partners. And when you think about it, I mean, that's money that we were wasting, right? It was untapped energy potential that was just being burned to the atmosphere. So not only are we now monetizing on this and we're able to increase our revenue to help our operating budget, but we're also helping the environment by not flaring so much of the gas, because we still have to flare some, but the vast majority of it is actually cleaned through this Amoresco facility. They pressurize it and they sell it in the open market as an RNG, as a renewable natural gas. So I think that's a wonderful part of the story as well. And then lastly, I was going to talk to you a little bit about Tres Rios, the wetland. If you've been out there, it's an amazing place. And it's all treated wastewater that's going through there. And it created this amazing sanctuary for birds and habitat restoration. Beautiful place, but rather than you continue to listen to me, I'm just going to play a short video for you. It's about a minute long. The aerial photography is a little outdated because it's definitely way more lush today than it was when they filmed this, but I think it's still a valid video. Let's see if I can get it to play. Okay, with that concludes my my presentation. I don't know if any of you have any questions at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Nazario. That was a great presentation, very informative.
Or
Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Nazario?
I have
And it was a really great presentation. On this end, no questions here, and I don't see any in the chat, Jeff.
Great. Hey, if any of you are interested in getting a tour of Tres Rios, maybe we can do something through ACEC, right? And then have a group of people come out, and we'd love to have you. I think it's a great story, and once you're out there and you see it, it's fantastic. So if anybody's interested, if you haven't seen it, please reach out to maybe Chuck or Eric, or reach out directly to me, and we can get something scheduled.
Sorry,
Yeah,
thanks.
and
Thank you for the offer. Yeah, Chuck and I will definitely coordinate on that. I think that'd be a great ACEC field trip. What do you say, Chuck?
yeah,
Thanks,
I think that sounds great. I'd love to go out and get a tour. I've seen it in the distance, but never really been into it that much. So that's cool. I have a question on the north side, north of the CAP, kind of the planning area of Phoenix that we've seen is really growing quickly out in that area with development. Are there any changes you foresee up in that area to the planning that may be occurring as far as capacity or anything else north of the CAP?
So one of the big changes that we've discussed, and this is something that's happened over the last 6 months to a year, is we essentially, I think everybody knows that in the future, we're going to go DPR, right? That's the Southwest, that's where we're headed. But in order to plan for that, we need to have treatment plants in the north. So the thought is that we will have 2 wastewater reclamation plants, future DPR plants, or indirect potable reuse plants. We still don't know. So the major change is that, just kind of going back to having Cave Creek potentially on one end and North Gateway water rec plant on the other side. So that's a change from the last few years. And I think part of it is just, we know with TSMC opening up kind of that west side, west of I-17 and everything that's going to follow, and with all the drought conversations and the issues with the Colorado River, we know that DPR is going to be part of that solution in the future. ADQ is working on developing the guidelines for DPR, and we just have to be ready for that. So that would be one of the changes that we've seen. So essentially, we want to, on the wastewater front, we want to see the north as kind of an independent system where everything goes to these 2 treatment plants, and that's kind of what we're looking at long term, to be able to provide additional water resources to allow for growth in the northern area. I guess that's something that's changed over the last 6 months to a year.
All right, thank you. The North Gateway timeline, is there a timeline on that, or is that still in the distance, not in the CIP, but may get pushed or something?
So it's complicated, right? Because we don't have the ability to fund that at this time. So we're hoping with development coming in, with some of the state land auctions that are happening, that we can kind of leverage that to get some funding to potentially start a plant up there. I don't know what size. I mean, would we go with a small interim facility, 2 MGD, 4 MGD? I don't know. We usually don't like to build really small things, but I think it might make sense initially. So funding it is going to be complicated. You know, some of the stuff that's developing in the north didn't quite follow the normal city process, right? So we need to update impact fees. We need to update water resource acquisition fees. The infrastructure financing plan needs to be updated. So that's why we're working hard on updating our master plan in the north, so that we're prepared to be able to include that infrastructure in the next updates of the impact fees and water resource acquisition fees. But in the interim, we've got to figure something out with these developments that are moving forward before we update those plans. So the thought is that they'll have to pay a proportionate share of that infrastructure, but we don't know. It's complicated. So the timeline, you know, if we had the money, if we had the funding available, we'd probably build it at a similar time frame as Cave Creek, if we had the ability to do that. But at this time, I don't see us doing that, but things could change. Things could change.
All right. Are there any other questions for Nazario?
So I don't have a question, but just a comment. Thank you, Nazario. Fantastic presentation. It wasn't too long ago that we were working together and you were making me look smarter than I was. I think your presentation today helped make me look like a genius of kind of splitting out water and wastewater, because when we do the combined presentations, we didn't get as in depth as we got today. So I think your presentation was amazing. I think the field trip idea is great. One of the highlights of my short time as interim water director was the tour that we had out to 91st Avenue and Trace Rios. I mean, you almost can't, I mean, we saw the video, right? But you almost can't believe it, even when you're there, that this is in the middle, you forget you're in the middle of a desert when you're out there. It's amazing. And the light, the wildlife and the vegetation and all that. I think a field trip out there is a fantastic idea. So anything that Amy and I can do to help facilitate that, Chuck and Nazario and Justin and Marigo, just let us know. I think it's a super idea. I'd love to go back out there. So fantastic presentation, Nazario. Thanks for giving it to us today.
Appreciate it, Eric. Thank you. And I think it was a great idea to split this up because it does give us a little bit more time to dive deeper into each of the other utilities, and as long as people are interested in it. But no, I think a tour would be fantastic, and either sometime before it gets too hot or plan it for the fall, right? Because when it's hot, I mean, we can still do it. It's just a little bit more uncomfortable when it gets really hot.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you.
So, no, if there's no other questions for Nazario, we'll turn it over to announcements. If anyone's got any announcements to make.
Eric, any announcements from, okay, I'm seeing you shaking your head, that's a no.
Yeah, unfortunately, right, coming up at the end of the fiscal year, so that means procurement slow down a little bit for us. Everyone, all the departments trying to get kind of their ducks in a row moving forward. So nothing, no design related. Well, you never know, there could be the one that surprises us, but no planned design procurements over the next month. We will see, right, for the next one, or for the next meeting. But yeah, no, the one announcement I guess that we have is we're working on kind of the final, we're putting the final touches on the city, the update to the city supplements to MAG. So we need to present, we have them done, or we think we have them done. We have to present those to DAB, the Development Advisory Board, but after we get their concurrence, we will be issuing the latest update. Hasn't been updated since I think 2015 was the last time that they had been looked at. So it had been a while. So it took us a while to get them updated. The hope is that following this update that we'll be able to do it annually. So it's not as heavy a lift in between, where we're just looking at what changes has MAG made to their details since this last update. So of course I will share that information with you, Justin and Amerigo, and then you can get it out to the group, help advertise that or help publicize that for us. We do see DAB in the middle of May. So, let's go for the end of May, beginning of June, maybe we just line it up with the fiscal year and just say effective, July 1. We'll see what type of comments come out of DAB. But I think for this group, just be on the lookout for that. And I think that's all the announcements I have.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Justin, any announcements?
Just very quickly, on roads and streets, because even though roads and streets is until the end of September, things are opening up quick. So on the 2nd of May, so Monday, May 2nd, is when general registration opens up. So for those who typically come and join us, or for those who haven't joined us yet, registration does open on May 2nd. So get in early, get in there often, and bring your people. We always love to see you guys. We are back at the El Conquistador, and our dates are September 28th through the 30th. So be there, be square. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending. Appreciate the attendance today, and thank you again, Nazario. In 3 weeks from today, we have Mr. Froberg giving a CIP update, and we call it the CIP extravaganza. So we'll have Mr. Froberg here May 17th. And then the other water, for the people on this call, the other water meeting, ACEC liaison, will be Brandy and Troy, September 20th. So another 4 months or so, 5 months. And appreciate everyone attending, and we'll see you in 3 weeks.
Bye,
Take
guys.
care.
Have a great day.
Yeah, this is water, wastewater. But the biggest- Water, wastewater.